Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to tonight's virtual equity workshop. We're going to be talking about the Restorative Code of Conduct. This is our new code of conduct that we rolled out this fall, and we're looking forward to sharing information with you about it. And we have a wonderful group of student panelists here to not only do a little bit of the presenting and share some of the information about the code of conduct, but they'll also be answering some questions about their experiences with school discipline in the Burlington School District and what their wishes and hopes are for our school district as we move forward to become a more restorative district. So thank you for being here tonight. We're excited to have this group together. We are recording. We ask that if you have questions, if you could utilize the chat feature to write those in the chat if they come up during the presentation. We will have a chance for a Q&A at the end. So if you want to hold your question until the end, you're welcome to do that as well, or you can post it in the chat and I'll do my best to make sure I respond to them in a timely manner. And if folks ever need me to repeat something or to slow down, I'm happy to do so. Just let me know. Feel free to use the chat feature or the raise hand. My name is Mika Moore, and I'm the Restorative Practices Coordinator here in Burlington School District. I use she, her pronouns, and one of my roles is to think about how we become a more restorative district. And one of the ways that we're thinking about doing that is through our code of conduct. So I'll just take us through the agenda for the night, and then Autumn will do a little bit introduction to our other virtual workshops, and then we'll introduce our student panelists. So just a brief agenda for our time together tonight is we're going to do some introductions of the folks who are on this call. We'll do an overview of the code of conduct. I'll take you through a very kind of high-level overview of what is contained in the code of conduct and encourage folks to go and read it for themselves and to take a look at that document. Like I said, we'll have a student panel where some students will answer some questions around their experiences with school discipline. We have an opportunity for question and answer around the code of conduct. And then we'll do a share out and closing and let us go on with our evenings.
So, hey everyone, my name is Autumn Bangura. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the equity instructional leader of the Burlington School District. These equity workshops this is the fourth year that we're doing them, and I really love this model because it's reaching out to the community and sharing a little bit of what the social justice and equity focused work that we're doing in schools. So this is just a little PR to let you know that this is the first one. But we also have one on hazing, harassment, and bullying intervention and prevention, dismantling white supremacy culture in schools in November, and LGBTQIA+ building safe and inclusive school climates in January. We started these in 2020 during COVID, so they were virtual, but we then last year started the in-person series. So this year, disability advocacy is our in-person theme. So we have one on disability rights and student advocacy, ableism in schools, and neurodivergence. And I just wanted to make sure everyone knows this is sponsored by the School District Office of Equity and give Sparks a chance to also introduce himself as well. Sparks, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Autumn. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sparks. I am the Director of Equity for the school district. And as Autumn was saying, this is the fourth year that we've been putting on these community conversations. And what it does, it gives us a unique opportunity of connecting with folks in a different way, especially thinking about when we were all locked down under COVID. We wanted to stay connected to the community, but also find ways of giving different people different ways of participating. So we will be doing more and other things that we would love to have some of you all, our community members, connected to in other opportunities of connecting with the Office of Equity if you have ideas and or suggestions of things that we could be doing that we may not be. So we look forward to working with you. And again, thank you for joining us this evening. And I'll turn it back over to you, Autumn.
Great. So I just want to have a chance to introduce, we have many students on this call. Almost all of these students have experience in youth leadership, and they're coming from the Summer Racial Justice Academy. So if students, I'm just going to go ahead and say your name and you can unmute and introduce yourself. So how about Dalib? Will you go first?
Hello, everybody. My name is Dalib Ali. I go to Edmonds Middle School, and I use he, him pronouns, and I'm in 8th grade.
Thanks, Dalib. How about Habiba?
Hello, my name is Habiba, and I'm in 8th grade in Edmonds Middle School.
Thanks, Habiba. How about Kali?
Hi, my name is Kali. I'm a 10th grade student at Burlington High School, and I go by she, her pronouns.
And Alex?
Sorry, was that me? I couldn't hear properly. Anyways, evening everyone. I'm Alex. I'm a 10th grader at BHS and BTC. I use he, him pronouns.
Thanks. And Aiden?
Hi, my name's Aiden. I'm a 9th grader at BHS and I use he, him pronouns.
And Liban?
Hello, my name is Liban. I'm in 7th grade, go to Edmonds Middle School, and I use he, him pronouns.
And Nasra?
Hello, my name is Nasra. I'm a 10th grader at Burlington High School, and I use she, her pronouns.
Awesome. We're so psyched you're all here. Anybody that was a teacher during virtual learning knows that students prefer to have their cameras off. And we're just like they're here, so whatever they're comfortable with. So students, you're welcome to keep your cameras off. And we'd also love to see your faces if you feel comfortable. All right, back to you, Mika. Let's get into the code of conduct.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So excited to have such a great group of students here tonight to be our student panelists. So we're going to talk about the code of conduct, and then we'll move into a student panel. So just to start off, we're going to think a little bit about the goals of the code of conduct. And Kali, if you want to start us off.
Yes. Solidify expectations of BSD community members, staff, and students, and families included. Change behavior responses towards a restorative lens. Minimize the time students are out of class for punitive reasons. Utilize restorative practices to resolve conflicts between students, staff, and families. Limit suspensions to extreme circumstances.
Thanks, Kali. Really appreciate that. So like Kali just went over the goals of the code of conduct. We want to make sure that we're becoming more of a restorative district. And one of the ways in which we do that is to really think about how do we handle unexpected and challenging behaviors when they arise? What is our response? And how can we make that response as consistent as possible? And Dalib will share a little bit around the purpose of the code of conduct now.
So the purpose of the code of conduct is to create consistency in how we respond to unexpected student behaviors, to provide guidance on what behaviors should be addressed within the classroom, what requires an office discipline referral, and what behaviors do and do not warrant suspension. Give a blueprint for restorative responses to harm between staff to students / families.
Thanks, Dalib. And I'm going to play, we actually, this summer, during our Summer Racial Justice Academy, the students of the Summer Racial Justice Academy made short TikTok videos about the code of conduct. So throughout this presentation, there'll be a couple of these short TikToks that the students put together. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. There may be a slight use of mildly explicit language. We hope that that is something that is acceptable for everybody.
You've been running through my mind all day. You've been running through my mind all day. You've been running through my mind all day. Hey, you've been running through my mind all day. You've been running, you've been running, you've been running, you've been running, you've been running through my mind all day.
So we appreciate the work of the Summer Racial Justice Academy students in helping us create these TikToks. We utilized these TikTok videos when we did a student rollout of the code of conduct. That's taking place during the month of September, and then into October is when we're rolling this out with students. And we know that one of the ways that students love to learn these days is through TikTok. So we thought, what better way than to have some of their peers make them videos about the code of conduct itself. Khalid, do you want to share a little bit about the student expectations?
Oh yeah, sorry. It is the responsibility of students to exercise and practice self-awareness, understand and follow school expectations, including the Restorative Code of Conduct and their school student handbook, behave in a manner that focuses on academic success, be responsible and accountable for meeting school expectations, help build a positive community.
So these are the student expectations. The Code of Conduct does outline expectations for students, staff members, families, the superintendent, and the school board. So all members of our community, up from the school board all the way to everyone else in our community. We chose to highlight the student expectations because we're utilizing this to really think about what student behavior is at school, but it's a majority of this document focuses on that. But it does outline some expectations for staff and student and family members, because this is the BSD Code of Conduct. It's not just the student Code of Conduct, but it's really the expectations for how we will all be as staff and students and families in our district. Dalib, do you want to do classroom behavior?
Yep. Students will follow school and classroom guidelines at all times. If you are unclear on what a rule/expectation means, ask. Certain behaviors may require you to be out of class to regulate, reset, and be ready to learn when you return. And if you are sent out of class, you'll need to check in with your teacher in order to return back to class.
Thanks, Dalib. So this is, again, geared towards students. When we think about what we expect of students, we want to make sure that they really know that if they aren't clear on what a rule or expectation means, to ask. If they're unclear on what's being asked of them, they can't be expected to follow through on that. That's why we were trying to make sure that we do things like a student version or student-facing slides for students to learn about the Code of Conduct, because we recognize that it's a lengthy document, and asking students to read a 15-page document isn't necessarily what is going to be the thing that makes them learn about it, but instead trying to do things like our TikTok videos and our student slideshow to make it more digestible for them so that they can really understand what's being expected of them. We want to empower students so that they can utilize the Code of Conduct if they're involved in a disciplinary situation, so that they can say, turn to the Code of Conduct and say, actually, I don't see this written up in the Code of Conduct, what you're trying to discipline me for. I'd like to know more information about why that's the case, so that they can actually utilize that document to empower them to have a voice and agency when it comes to the discipline process. These are just some tips and tricks that we offer for teachers to think about when it comes to handling classroom behaviors. We recognize that things will arise in the classroom, and there's going to be times that teachers have to handle behavior within their classroom. And so we thought we would give them some tips and tricks about how to handle that. So some examples of these would be to be proactive. That means doing things like co-constructing your class agreements at the beginning of the year. We know this is something many, many teachers do. To make positive phone calls home, to check in with families from the start of the school year, to check in and get to know the family and the student in a positive way, in case you have to do any type of phone call, letting them know about a challenging situation, that you've done a positive phone call first. If a classroom behavior arises that's unexpected or challenging, utilizing a calm directive to clearly state what the expectations are of the student without yelling or raising your voice, but to be very calm and letting them know, restating the expectations, and then to give constructive and specific feedback. Sometimes this can look like a verbal prompt or quick correction. So an example of that is saying, like, student name, by doing blank, which is the unexpected behavior, you're not meeting our classroom agreement of blank. Could you please? And then remind them again of the expected behavior or the expectation that they're not meeting. You can give a redirection. So for example, some of the sentence here would be saying, right now we're doing blank. How can I help you get back on track? So approaching things with a phrase of curiosity and interest to know, why is this taking place? I want to help you get back on track. rather than expecting that that student knows how to be able to do that. What their behavior is telling us, if they're doing something that's unexpected in the classroom, is that they're not sure of the expectation. They have an unmet need, and we need to help them meet that need by asking them, how can I help you get back on track? After behavior has occurred in the classroom, there's some different responses that you can do to utilize a more restorative approach. Instead of having a behavior occur and just ignoring it and thinking that nothing took place and not addressing it, there's some things that teachers or staff members or even family members can do when it comes to after the behavior has happened. Some of these you can utilize at home as well. So this isn't just set to the classroom. You can use the restorative chat questions, and these are linked in the presentation, but the restorative chat questions go through what happened, what were you thinking about at the time, what have you thought about since, and what do you need to do to try to move forward from this situation? And you can utilize those questions with the student to process what took place and to address the behavior with them after it occurs. You can also provide the student with a reset pass where they can walk or take a visit with a trusted adult in the building, and where you give them a very clear set amount of time for this to take place. It wouldn't be unsupervised, it would be with a trusted adult in the building. You can utilize the restorative chat questions to have a restorative conference. That could look like having a warm conversation with the student. I just wanted to show you what this warm conversation looks like. A warm conversation looks like talking about what happened. That's the W for warm. So you can think about, what was I thinking about at the time? What am I thinking about now about what happened? Then in the A, you're thinking about who was affected. Who was affected by what happened? Was what happened fair, or was what happened the right thing? So again, thinking about the affect or the impact of the behavior. And then the R stands for repair. What do I need to do to repair things? How can I help put things right? And when can this happen? Making a plan for when it will take place. When will that repair happen? And then the M stands for moving forward. How can we make sure this doesn't happen again? What do I need to start, stop, or stay doing? And if this happens again, what do I think should happen next? So addressing that, if this behavior happened again, what would be the appropriate response? So that's an example of a warm conversation. And again, this is something that's not unique to just the classroom. This is something that you could utilize at home too, if you have a challenging behavior or just one of those tough evenings where something occurs and you want to be able to address it after it takes place. The warm conversation is one way to do so. You can also utilize a behavior checkout system for the classroom where you give the students an opportunity to reflect on you every day on how their behavior was for that day in the classroom. Or they could utilize a reflection activity where they're actually reflecting on what was done with what occurred, and they can do that with a teacher while other students are doing independent learning activities. So this is just some examples. This is not an all-inclusive list, but these are just some examples of what can be done after a behavior occurs that was challenging in the classroom. So sometimes some warrant behaviors mean that a student cannot be in class. These behaviors don't automatically rise to the level of suspension, but they do disrupt the learning environment to the degree that the student cannot be in class, and they need a chance to reset and re-regulate their behavior. Sometimes this can look like going with a trusted adult to process what is going on for that student, to help them get back to a place where they're regulated and where they're able to check in with their teacher when they return to class to be able to be there successfully. What we in the district want to make sure of that is if a student is sent out of class, then we're writing up an office referral. And what we need to be able to document the behavior that occurred and any lost instructional time. It's really important that we know what went on for a student, so that way if we're communicating with a family, we can go into our data system, look up any office referrals that student might have, and be able to talk to the family in an informed way about what's going on for that student. If we don't document the behavior, we don't know that it occurred, and we can't provide a comprehensive picture to families and to students of what that student's school days look like. Really important to note that if a student is sent out of class, they should have access to the missed work while they're away. We don't want students getting further behind when they're out of class. Even if they're out of class for 20 minutes, they should have access to the missed work while they're away, and there should be a restorative welcome back into the classroom when they return. That could look like a quick check in with the teacher. When the trusted adult brings that student back, they could check in with the teacher and say, here's what I processed, here's how I'm doing now, here's how I'm going to have a different next hour in the class than the last 20 minutes that I had. But they need to make sure that they do have that chance to check in with the teacher so that they're welcome back into the classroom, so that they don't feel any type of stigma or any type of ostracization from being sent out of class. Here's another short TikTok. In case you can't read the caption, it says, if a student is sent out of class, then an office referral must be written to document the behavior and the lost instructional time. Great. So some behaviors require a restorative response. These are behaviors that sometimes historically in our district, we may have previously relied on suspension for, and we're now trying to utilize a restorative response in place of a suspension. We do not want to rely on suspension. Suspension excludes students from their learning. We know that it does not teach students about what is expected of them, and it does not actually help students in engaging in different behavior. So we want to instead have a restorative response that teaches students about the impact of their behavior and provides them with an opportunity to learn from and do things differently going forward. So we're just going to give some examples. This, again, is not an all-inclusive list, but this is some examples of behaviors that do come up in schools. We've seen them come up before, and while previously we may have utilized suspensions, instead now we're going to be moving towards a more restorative response. And in the Code of Conduct itself, it actually lists out these behaviors, and then it provides a table where it shows some restorative responses that you could do in place. So Dalib and Kali are going to read the behaviors, and then we'll talk a little bit about what some restorative responses might be. Kali, do you want to start us off with the first one?
Yes. Truancy.
Thank you.
Tardiness or absence.
Dress code violation.
Swearing.
Skipping class, hiding from staff.
Leaving campus when not permitted to. So that's basically high school.
Tobacco use.
Marijuana and or alcohol use or possession.
Minor fight.
Defiance or lack of cooperation.
Misuse of classroom materials.
Verbal altercation.
Wandering halls.
And minor vandalism.
Thank you so much, Dalib and Kali. So these are some examples of, again, behaviors that while previously we may have relied on suspension, we are moving away from utilizing suspensions in our district, and instead we're trying to think about a restorative response. So an example of, for example, tobacco use, marijuana use, or alcohol use or possession, an example of a restorative response, instead of suspending a student, we would ask the student to meet with the school's SAP counselor and to engage in some awareness around what is tobacco use or marijuana or alcohol use. How does that impact your body, your brain, and your development? So we would invite them to meet with the SAP counselor over a course of sessions to engage in some learning around what are these behaviors, how do they impact your development and your body's functioning. So again, they're learning about the impact of their behavior rather than being suspended without any opportunity for learning. An example for wandering the halls might be that you invite a trusted adult. That could be a parent, a guardian, it could be a coach, a pastor, someone that is important in the life of that student. And we invite them in to shadow the student for a half day to get an idea of what the student's educational experience is like, and to be able to learn from that student and to see what they're experiencing during the school day and provide them with some feedback around here's how things could look differently for you. Those are just a few ways that we're trying to, again, think about a more restorative response to behaviors when they occur.
Are you trying to pull up to my crib? I think you really gotta go.
So that said, when they suspend you for minor fights, knocking on doors, targeting, skipping class, those are non-suspendable offenses. Utilize restorative practices instead. That was the quote on that TikTok. So again, we're trying to think about how we can be less reliant on suspension that separates a student from their learning environment, and instead try to think about restorative responses. And if you are interested, I really encourage you to go into the Code of Conduct itself and check out the table that has all these behaviors and then a variety of different restorative responses that you can do in place of suspension. So like I said, we're trying to think about alternatives to suspension. They're considered on a case-by-case basis. We think about, they really have to be tailored to exactly the behavior that occurred. So an alternative option is should be agreed upon by the student and the administrator together. They should be thinking about together what do they want to have happen when it comes to the restorative response, and does it fit the nature of what occurred? So making sure that whatever the behavior was, the restorative response fits what happened. Some options that can be done in place of a suspension are something called a learning pathway, and I'll tell you a little bit more about a learning pathway in a moment. But the learning pathway is one opportunity for a student to learn from and learn about the harmful behavior that occurred, and to learn about what they could do in place of that or instead of that, to really understand the impact of their behavior and to understand how they can make things right. So like I said, the Code of Conduct details a lot of other options in place of suspension, but they would all be tailored based on what the behavior that occurred is. So as I mentioned, a learning pathway is an individual learning environment. So that's an opportunity where the person who caused the harm is offered a series of educational opportunities centered around the topic of the harmful behavior. These are designed as intentional lessons for students or staff. We have had staff members engage in learning pathways as an opt-in model, where they reflect on an action harmful action that took place, and they learn about the history and context of that action, and then they explore ways to be accountable for that. Autumn, do you want to share anything about learning pathways, as you're someone who began these and has facilitated a number of them?
Yeah, I think that it really came out of a result of mainly thinking that instead of just punishing with consequences, that appropriate consequences to learn about the mistakes, a lot of it came actually from HHB investigations and post-substantiated HHB. So when there was harassment and bullying that happened, there is a formal process to investigate, and if it's substantiated, the letter goes home. But the students don't really have any learning that happens as a result of it. So there's learning pathways on the use of racial slurs, of homophobic language, on sexual harassment, and they're tailored for, there's elementary ones and there's middle and high ones as well.
Yeah, so sometimes schools will reach out to us, and Autumn or myself will go in and facilitate these learning pathways. Also, at all of our schools that have restorative practices specialists, the restorative practices specialist is someone who can also facilitate those learning pathways. This is a one-to-one environment, so it's really individualized to that student and to the behavior that happened. And ultimately, they're exploring accountability. So it looks different instead of, like Autumn said, having an HHB investigation where then substantiated. There needs to be opportunity for that student to learn from what occurred. And that's what we wanted to have happen with these learning pathways, is to take that harmful behavior and turn it into an opportunity to explore accountability for what occurred. So suspension is a last resort. We know that it excludes students from learning and from the learning environment. And we do not, in our district, want to rely on it as a way to extinguish behavior. It does not help to stop students from behavior. It doesn't offer them a learning opportunity. And in our district, we know that historically, suspensions have been disproportionately used against students with disabilities, students of the global majority, and students living in poverty in our district. And so because of that, we have district policy that requires we reduce and eliminate these disparities. So the Code of Conduct details some of the behaviors that may warrant a suspension. Again, this is not an exhaustive list that we're about to go over, but it's some behaviors that could require suspension. But this should only be considered, suspension should only be considered if there's an egregious safety concern. So when there's a concern that a student cannot be de-escalated to the point where they're safe to return to the learning environment, or if school staff has exhausted and documented all other forms of intervention and alternatives for a behavior, if it's not a safety concern, but they've done everything else, that they've exhausted all other resources and they've documented their use of all these interventions and alternatives, and they have nothing left to do, we can consider a suspension. But again, this is a very last resort. We do not want to exclude students from their learning environment. And we know that it doesn't provide a teaching opportunity for students to learn from and change their behavior. Some of the suspendable offenses have to be reported to the police or the agency of education. And this is some example of some suspendable offenses. Not all of these would be reported to the police or the agency of education. Some of them may be. But this is just an example of some of the behaviors that may require a student to be separated from their learning environment. Any weapon or firearms possession, if there's drug possession with the intent to sell and or distribute, making a school threat, tampering with safety equipment, a physical assault, any sex-based harassment, sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, or stalking, refusing to allow a search. Some HHB, some hazing, harassment, and bullying may require suspension, or lewd and lascivious conduct. So as you can see, these are very high-level, intense behaviors that we're saying these are the behaviors that may require a suspension. It's not an exhaustive list of some of the things that could be suspended for, but these are the ones historically, if we've seen in our district, that we're saying this might require a student to be separated from their learning environment. As you can see, many of these pose a significant safety concern to the school and the school environment. If there is a suspension, there should be a restorative exit and a restorative reentry. What is a restorative exit? A restorative exit means that the student really understands why they're being separated from the school community. They should be able to look in the code of conduct and find the reason for their suspension, and that they should be able to understand that the suspension is not being used as a punishment, but an opportunity to correct a safety violation that's occurred. And they should understand how they're going to be supported when they'll be out. What will their plan for their education look like? How will they have access to educational opportunities and materials? What will that be when they're suspended? And again, this is for anything that's over 1/4 of the school day. If you are separated from your learning environment for 1/4 of the school day or more, that is considered a suspension. So there should be a restorative exit where the student understands, yes, this is the behavior that occurred. I recognize my part in it. I can see in the code of conduct why this is a suspension. And I understand the plan for what I'm going to do to continue to access my education while I'm away. A restorative and safe reentry should also be planned for when the student's returning. If the behavior caused a safety concern, there should be a plan put in place to ensure that that behavior doesn't occur again and what's being done to prevent it from happening. This restorative reentry meeting should involve the parents and guardians and should take place before the student comes back to the school environment. So they have an opportunity to talk about how are things going to look different so that what occurred once does not happen again. So that was reentry plan. We have a number of supporting documents around what those reentry agendas can look like for the meeting, but really it's focusing on what happened, what do we need to have happen differently, and how can we support the student in having a different set of, or having a different experience in school as opposed to what occurred previously to cause the suspension. And this should be a multidisciplinary team. It could be the administrator, potentially the school counselor, the classroom teacher. If the student has an IEP, the case manager should always be involved. And again, they're making that plan for what should happen for the student when they're coming back from a suspension. We recognize that in our district, there is going to be harm that happens between all different stakeholders. That's the nature of being in community and being human with one another, is that conflict is going to occur. With that, we want to make sure that there's accountability when harm or conflict occurs. So if there's staff to staff harm, if there's staff to student or staff to family harm, Our expectation in Burlington School District is that folks are invited to participate in a restorative process. Restorative processes are always voluntary, but we want to ensure that that invitation to say there was harm that occurred, someone said that you caused harm, we'd like to invite you to participate in a restorative process. If staff members opt into that, they participate in a restorative process. That's how one way that staff members can be held accountable when harm occurs. But if staff members cause harm to another staff member, a student, or a family, and they decline or refuse to participate in a restorative process, we want to be very clear that disciplinary measures will still be taken. This can be challenging at times because these measures are confidential. So what took place as a result of the disciplinary measures cannot be shared. But just so folks are aware of what is the progressive discipline model in the Burlington School District, these are the steps. So sometimes depending on the nature of the harm that occurred, you can jump a step and you might start like right at step 3. It depends on what occurred. But generally speaking, the first step is an informal verbal directive given by the supervisor to the person who caused that harm. Step 2 would be a formal verbal reprimand. Step 3 is a formal written reprimand without suspension. Step 4 is a formal written reprimand and suspension without pay. And step 5 is termination. Again, this is progressive discipline to ensure that if the same harmful situation is happening again and again, you wouldn't just go back to step 1 every time. There might be times that, again, things jump and go right to step 4 and potentially even step 5, depending on how the nature of what the harm that occurred. We know that students from the Summer Racial Justice Academy have asked for more accountability when it comes to the harm that takes place. And so we're trying to make sure that all our building principals and all of our district leaders are aware of the progressive discipline model through our Human Resources Department, and everyone knows the steps that Human Resources takes as it follows the progressive discipline model. Again, we're hopeful that people will participate in a restorative process, but if you refuse, that doesn't mean that that's it, and you just get to say, well, I'm not going to do a restorative process, so therefore, case closed. No, we have another way of addressing that and holding folks accountable. So we wanted to review some ways to report concerns. This is also part of the Code of Conduct because when things occur in our building and in our district, we being the Office of Equity and the greater district at large want to know about what's occurring. So there's 2 ways to report different concerns, 2 different methods. If you see something unfair, inequitable, or unjust happening in schools, you can fill out an equity request ticket. Anyone can fill out this ticket, and Autumn just dropped in the chat the link for an equity request ticket. We always look at these tickets daily when they come in, and you will get a response within 3 days. These can be submitted anonymously, and they can be given for submitted by students, by staff, or by family or community members, again, if they feel like there's an equity issue that has arisen in a school and it needs to be addressed. The other way to report something, if people are concerned about a community member who may be at risk of harming themselves or others, is the See Something, Say Something anonymous reporting line. That phone number is 802-540-3710. There are posters up in our schools with this phone number, and a response is guaranteed within 24 hours. Again, this would be for a concern that doesn't rise to the level of needing to call emergency personnel. But if you want to report, and you can report anonymously an issue where you're concerned about a community member. The equity request ticket and the See Something, Say Something line are both ways that people can report concerns that they have in our district. We also have an equity email address that you can email directly. If you don't want to utilize either of these methods, you can email the equity Office of Equity email address directly and raise your concerns as well. Thank you, Autumn, for posting that in the chat. That's the equity@bsdvt.org. We felt it was important to address in this presentation that folks know their rights and know what, particularly for parents or guardians, when it comes to rights in the disciplinary process. So if there's a suspension, parents and guardians and the student must be notified of the suspension, the reason for it, and you should be able to look in the Code of Conduct and find that reason in the Code of Conduct. And you should be given the duration of the suspension. How long is it going to last for? And you should be notified of this on the day the suspension goes into effect. Now, every suspendable offense may not be listed in the Code of Conduct, but it should be able to be pointed to that it's either a safety concern or, again, it's that all other forms of intervention and alternatives have been documented and tried to no avail. And in parents and guardians, you do have the right to appeal a suspension with the superintendent. If the suspension has already taken place, you can appeal the suspension still, and you can appeal to have it removed from a student's permanent record. That record does not follow a student after they leave the Burlington School District when they finish 12th grade. That record does not follow them, but you can appeal to have it removed from that student's Burlington School District record. So now we're going to invite, that's plenty you've heard from me. I think we'd love to hear from some students now. So what I'll do is I'll ask a question and then I'll call on some students here. And Autumn just posted in the chat the students' names. We have 8 students here tonight. We're thrilled to have them here. So we'll start. What was your experience with school discipline like in Burlington School District? And students, just to remind you, you can always say I'd like to pass on that answer. But what was your experience with school discipline like here in BSD? And we'll start with, I'll go in the order that Autumn posted in the chat, Aiden.
Hi.
Right. So what's been your experience with school discipline, Aiden?
My experience with school discipline is probably that the school either does something and doesn't tell anybody or doesn't do anything and still doesn't tell anybody.
Thanks, Aiden. I appreciate you sharing your experience. Let's go to Alex.
I think my experience has been pretty similar to Aiden's. You know, there really isn't a concrete disciplinary system in place. And if there is like a blatant, outlash or form of disrespect, just like profanities at teachers in the hallways, stuff like that, even though it's not serious, it should still be addressed and, explain to the student why it's not appropriate. And that doesn't happen. I think that's one of the most common forms of disrespect that should be addressed in a disciplinary manner.
Thanks, Alex. Dalib?
So pretty much I was in the school district my whole life, so like I had to follow this all the time I've been all the time I've been to like going to school. And I really didn't know that until maybe a couple years ago. I didn't really know that there was like kind of a problem that was going on. And I agree with like Alex and Aiden. There's I just say there's like a problem with like how things are handled.
Yeah, thanks, Dalib. Appreciate you sharing that. Habiba?
My experience with school discipline is that teachers the teachers don't like really explain why you're getting like discipline and like giving like a proper reason why.
Thanks. And I apologize, I'm not sure. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Aisha or Isha?
They don't really do much for discipline. Like in my opinion.
Thanks for sharing. Kali?
Yeah, I think that teachers and staff, they tend to jump to conclusions and they tend to just go to harsh discipline like suspension, expelled, whatever. And I think that like they don't seek reasoning or like seek why the person did what they did. They don't really have like a conversation kind of with the student. It's more so like they heard what the student did and then they take action. And usually when they're hearing what they did, it's from another staff member.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't really ask the student, oh, what happened, That's yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. Liban?
My experience with the school discipline is really similar to Colley's. They really don't care about your explanation, and they just jump to conclusions, and they threaten you with like a suspension or something because they have like the higher authority than us.
Thanks for that. Nasra?
I haven't really seen a lot of school discipline, but I've noticed that they tend to try and discipline you for the dumbest reasons. They try and discipline you for the dumbest reasons but when teachers are doing things that need to be disciplined, they don't quite talk about it a lot, and it's quite often overlooked.
Thanks, Nasser. I appreciate that. My next question is, how do you hope things could be different at Burlington School District? And I'll just invite a student to kick us off. Anyone can unmute and just say, how do you hope things would be different in Burlington School District?
I could start off with that.
Thanks, Billy.
So I hope things could be different. Like, teachers could ask like different perspective of students, as Cully said before, jumping to conclusions, because that way, like suspension, if it would have to be enforced, it could be like, I'd say, more reasonable to do it after hearing multiple students like see what happened, or like talk about how they felt, or what action should be taken, like do they think should be taken on the situation.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, kind of connecting to Dolly, I think that if teachers tried or put in an effort to making more connections with students would feel more comfortable speaking up to teachers and be like, no, this is actually what happened, and I would really like for you to understand where I'm coming from. And I feel like that can't happen unless teachers make it feel like students can be more open to them, and make it feel like that they can talk to them without feeling like they're being threatened, or that if they say the wrong thing, bad things are going to happen.
Thanks, Kelly. You guys are making some really great
Kinda
points
just-
here. Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, kind of just adding on to what's been said. I feel like this idea of a hierarchy and the fear and the threatening needs to be done away with. I don't think teachers should have the right to make students afraid of them no matter like what the action is. There needs to be this idea of reciprocated respect. I agree with that much. But there should not be this, I'm higher up on the chain than you, I'm better than you. And I feel like that's what we see a lot in the schools right now.
Any other students?
Can I go next?
Yeah, go ahead, Aiden.
I just kind of want the school district to like at least disclose if something's going on.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Like if somebody comes to a staff member with a problem and it's dealt with behind like the scenes and nobody really knows if something's going on, it feels like nothing's going on, and that can be damaging to a community.
Thanks, Aiden. Thank you for expanding on that idea.
Like giving like more like follow-ups on like if you like report something to like a staff, like a teacher or like a staff member.
I think that I hope that like teachers will stop thinking like they can be above us because they have like hierarchy, and like they can like suspend us, and they only like I hope they can like talk to us like the same as they do as like parents and other teachers.
I really agree with Kali and Dalib. I feel like if teachers just listened to your reasoning behind on why you did what you did, I feel like it'd be
Thank you all for sharing your hopes. We have two more questions. The first one is, how can schools in the Burlington School District, how can we move towards more restorative responses to challenging behavior? Or like instead of being punitive and relying on suspension, how can we have a more restorative response? And anyone can start us off.
I'll just go. I feel like that punitiveness that you mentioned is kind of rooted in that, idea of fear and instilling power. So I think moving towards restorative practices and responding to challenging behaviors, I feel like to do that, we need to get rid of this idea of the hierarchy.
I honestly agree with Alex. I think that like in order to stop as much suspension, I think that teachers need to like treat students how they would treat their other teachers and parents.
Yeah, expanding on Dolly and Alex, which I totally agree with. I think that teachers and students, they need to be more on level. Like, I understand, when you need, when you obviously need to be respectful towards teachers, but it doesn't always have to be, they don't always have to be the higher power. Obviously, when you need to put your foot down, you have to, and get the students in place if there is actually like a time when that's necessary. But it doesn't always have to be like a power struggle, or someone always has the upper hand. It could be more level.
I agree with Kali, Aiden, and I mean Kali, Alex, and Dalib. I feel like there should be like more of a leveled, like there shouldn't be like a bigger, like such a big gap between like the power of a student and a teacher. I feel like we should all have like the right to like speak up and stuff like that.
Let's move to our last question, which is, what do you hope for as the district rolls out this new code of conduct? What do you heard you've gotten to make TikToks about the code of conduct. You've thought a little bit about it. You've read some of it, and you got to hear about it tonight. What do you hope for as the district rolls out the new code of conduct?
I hope that wait, never mind.
Well, for me, I am in 10th grade, but I'm actually graduating next year. And I know that it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time for it to, get all into place and get everyone to hop on board with it. But I really, truly do hope that I've been a part of the Burlington School District my whole life. And, it's had its ups and downs. And I have younger siblings on the way. So I really hope that they can, experience this with all the new, rules and everything that should be followed. I really hope that they can, get their part in that, and they don't have to really face the same things I had to face.
Agreeing with Kali, I also hope that for my younger sibling, I can make the school district a better place. And also, I'd really enjoy or like it if there are like any big changes made to the new code of conduct. I really do hope that they inform students, because a lot of changes happen a lot, but oftentimes students aren't informed about it.
I hope.
You
my
you
bad.
you can go. You can go.
Thanks. I hope that students can use this to know when they're being suspended for not a non-suspendable offense, or to know like when the school district is being unfair.
Yeah, me personally, I honestly agree with Aiden. I hope, like as Kali said, we're siblings, so we have little siblings. coming up the grades. I really hope that the system on how teachers treat students would, you know, like level up. And I think students should know like when they're not being treated how they should.
I kind of hope that student, staff, and families are all educated on the expectations outlined in the Code of Conduct. Because if they're not, it's kind of just a document that's laying around somewhere, and no one really knows what they're supposed to be doing or what the expectations are for disciplinary action in the school district. So maybe, using advisory time at BHS or sending out a couple of emails to parents or whatever to make sure that it's actually in the hands of the people that it's going to affect. I do hope that it will actually change action and how discipline is handled at BSD. I think it will. I think it's a pretty good plan, but it's that distribution and education that I think is necessary to making sure that it's successful.
I hope that the school district will change all the ways that they think that like teachers are like very high above us, and I think that when, like as I'm growing up, I hope that like I can like experience this like new code of conduct and how our school changes.
I hope that the Burlington school districts like use this and like change like the environment around school.
Thank you, students, so much for sharing your thoughts and perspectives in that panel. It's powerful to hear from you. I had to mute myself because I found myself nodding along and agreeing with you with so many of your statements. So thank you for sharing your powerful experiences and your hopes. That really lights a fire under me to make sure that the way that we're rolling this out is done well, because it matters and it makes a difference for your experience. So thank you for taking the time to share that. I know that Autumn said, thank you, student leaders, taking notes on all of what you said. And I agree, and we're going to make sure that this isn't just a document that lives on a shelf. We're going to keep it front and center in the hearts and minds of our teachers and all of our staff members. We wanted to open it up for questions from the community. Anyone on the call, you're welcome to share a question. You can use the just unmute and ask your question, or you can use the chat feature, whichever you prefer. If you have any questions, now's the time. Claire. Claire, you're welcome to go ahead and unmute. I'm not sure if you're speaking, Claire, but you're still muted. Okay, it looks like Claire might just be staying muted. Any other questions or comments from the community? Habiba.
Is this like official, like the new code of conduct?
Great question. It is official. So we began the rollout of the Code of Conduct this fall. What we did was we spent the last year getting feedback from students, from families, from teachers, from all different, like the superintendent's advisory groups. We got a lot of different people to give us feedback on it. And now it's officially rolled out. So it's been every school, all the staff members have been educated on the Code of Conduct. They've actually had a similar slideshow to what we went through tonight. They got to see some of the TikToks that we shared tonight. And they got to learn about what is in the Code of Conduct and what's expected of them as teachers. So all school staff members have been trained in the Code of Conduct. And like I mentioned, it's still being rolled out with students. It will be gone over in advisory during at BHS in the next few weeks. And then it's in different town halls or community time in our other schools. or during morning meeting. But it is official, and we're going to change every year. We'll update the code of conduct. There's a feedback form in it, and so we welcome people's feedback as they utilize it, or as people are like working with it. We ask people to give us their feedback, and then once a year we'll make edits to the code of conduct and change it for the upcoming school year. Does that answer your question, Habiba?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see, Nasra.
First, I wanted to ask where we could find this slide, assuming it's open to us. And then I wanted to ask how changing the code of conduct will work out. I know you mentioned us looking at it during advisory time, but like, say if we had something we'd like to add to the code of conduct, how would that work out?
Great question, Nasra. You know what, actually, I'll just open up the code of conduct and show you all in it right where you can find the feedback, so that way everyone knows. So this is the code of conduct. It is live on our website. It's linked on our website in the Office of Equity. Superintendent Flanagan has also shared it in a community update. But the code of conduct has a table of contents. You can click the table of contents, and where it says feedback form, if you click that, it'll take you to right here where it says, would you like to provide feedback, suggestions, or a question about the code of conduct? And then you click this link that says form, and you can actually use this feedback form where you write your name, what your affiliation with. So Nasser, if you wanted to give feedback, you would choose student. And then what suggestions, feedback, or questions do you have about the code of conduct? And you can write everything there. And then, like I said, we're going to make edits to it. This year, because it's the first year, we're going to make edits in December and again in May. And then going forward, we'll make them every May for the next school year. But because this is the first year, we wanted to do edits twice in the year, knowing that there might be more feedback coming in the first year of its rollout.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. Claire, let's see.
I was able to unmute. It's Claire
Okay.
Wool. Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't unmute on my phone. Thanks, everybody. It is really impressive to listen to all the students. And I really appreciate you, Mika and Autumn, for organizing this Zoom tonight. How do other students, all of our students at the elementary school, middle school, and high school, learn about this, your presentation? Are we doing it in, our advisory, or how are we educating students on the progress that we've made and the student activism?
Nasser, did you want to respond to that, or do you have another question?
I just wanted to respond. For me personally, and I know this is also true for a couple of other students, I actually wasn't made aware of the code of conduct. Like, it wasn't shared to me till SRJA. So I feel like students aren't really students aren't really like involved in it, and they're not really,
Yeah, so one way that we're trying to get it out in front of students is through advisories. So BHS plans to roll this out in their advisory within the next 3 weeks. And then we had School Safety Week 2 weeks ago, where we created student-facing slides about the code of conduct, similar to these slides, but in more student-friendly language. And we asked that those be presented in advisory or during morning meeting. So that's how we're trying to get it out in front of folks. But we know that there's definitely more to do when it comes to educating our students about the code of conduct.
That's great. Thanks, Mika, for that. I mean, because we know that elementary school guidance is one of our classroom lessons throughout the week. I don't know if we used to have guidance, twice a week, but elementary schools have that. And so we know that our guidance counselors at our kindergarten to 5th grade can talk about it in the age-appropriate manner. And then at middle school, I wasn't sure if Hunt and Edmonds have homeroom, or, is it a student assembly, or what it is, this day and age, because my kids are older now, and I'm not sure what they do at middle school. But I know knowledge is power, and I'm so impressed from the students that spoke tonight. I was impressed from the last 3 years of Racial Justice Academy, where students learn a great deal, and I hear it in your voices. I hear it how you articulate your concerns and how you want progress for your younger siblings. And so that is so powerful. You are absolutely the voices that, we have an avenue thanks to Sparks and Autumn and Mika and everyone else who has helped in reaching out to students to hear their experiences, because we do want to evolve and we do want students to be informed and know their rights and know, like, having a code of conduct gives people substance. So thank you all for expressing what you've experienced to a certain degree, and know that at the elementary level, we're concerned, middle school and high school, and at the tech center. And this has been a lot of work. And thank you to the BSD staff and the students that have contributed to making this come to life. So much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Claire. I appreciate that. And thank you for your gratitude to the students as well. Any other questions or comments? So this is our first year of rolling out the Code of Conduct district-wide, so we expect that there will be feedback and suggestions made, and we welcome those. We want, as people are utilizing it, those feedback means that people are working with it and are thinking about the Code of Conduct. So we welcome those feedback and suggestions, and we'll take them into account as we make edits to it. So you can use the feedback form that I shared, that I showed in the Code of Conduct itself. You're also just welcome to email equity@bsdvt.org or restorative-practices@bsdvt.org. Either of those email addresses, you can raise any questions or comments you have as it relates to the Code of Conduct or anything that you heard tonight, and we'd be welcome that conversation. Conversation means that people are thinking about it and are talking about it, and that's what we want. We want to have this document be something that isn't a document on the shelf, but is really alive. Go ahead, Sparks.
Thank you, Mika. First and foremost, I would really like to thank our students for their excellent participation in going through the Code of Conduct and being willing to participate in this work. The other thing I want to say to our students, it is your voices that we really need to hear to hold us, especially the Office of Equity, accountable and responsible to you and your needs. So one of the things I would encourage you to do, feel free to go back to your schools and ask the administrators how they plan to make sure students are informed about the Code of Conduct. Because the more we put it out there, the more students and parents and others understand what we're trying to do. So when we created the Code of Conduct, one of the things we really wanted to make sure of is that students have a voice in this work. So as we think about the Summer Racial Justice Academy, that is one of the places where students had a big hand in looking at it, giving us feedback and giving us an opportunity to make it better with your voices. So anything that you all think we should be doing, please feel free to let us know. And again, I encourage you to talk to your school administrators and just ask them, because we've talked to them and we will be in your schools, but anything else we can do to get this out district-wide, we are ready, willing, and able to do. And again, I applaud you and thank you for being a part of this conversation. You guys were excellent, and thank you.
With that, that concludes our presentation about the Code of Conduct. I want to first and foremost thank our student presenters who did an amazing job on the panel. Thank you all for sharing so candidly and openly about your experiences. That really made a difference in thinking and knowing why this document needs to exist. So thank you all. And thank you to our community members for making the time to come tonight to learn about the Code of Conduct and to hear from our students. We really appreciate your time. And to everyone who is here tonight, thank you for engaging with us to learn more and to be in community with us. Autumn, do you want to say anything else?
Nope. Thank you so much to the students, and thank you to all the participants here as well for coming. come to the next one as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for
Thank you,
having me.
Mika.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
Bye.
Peace out, Girl Scouts.
Goodbye.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Oh my God, they're so amazing.
They're so amazing, Autumn. They were so great. Oh, wait, we're still recording.
Oh, I better stop.